Hello, guys, welcome to this podcast, Everyday Talkies, which ironically does not come out daily. I am Anshul and I talk about random things to random people, majorly about life, perspectives, and thinking process. It's like an interview, or let's say more of a conversation with one or two guests about random topics that interest us. To be really honest, it's just a way to reduce my inhibitions in talking to people. So come join me and enjoy. Hello, guys, welcome to the new episode of Everyday Talkies. So, this is a change from the usual routine. We have now two guests in the podcast. My budget has increased, though quality, I don't think so. Moving on. So, I have brought back my cousin and my roommate as guests in the podcast. Now, they usually are regular guests in the podcast, and guys might have already known about that, but they also have very similar interests. So that is why I relate to them the most. Yeah, so we have Vivek as my cousin and we have Pushkar. So why don't we start? There's too much of introduction now. You both have common interests. So let's start with something unique which we have never discussed before. And we'll go one by one about your journey through them. The common interest between both of you is birds, which I have known. Why? See, I personally have no real interests in birds. Like I like to listen to them. I can see pictures of them, but I don't have any fascination to go out looking for them or click their pictures. And how did you stumble upon that?
Okay, I don't know where to start with birds. See, I think it would be better if we started with photography because the whole reason I got into bird watching is because of photography. Like our family used to go on trips every summer, right? Yeah, वहाँ पे जाना. So like every state we used to visit every summer. And because of that, वहाँ पे जाके हर जगह जाने के बाद तो photo लेना ही पड़ेगा obviously. So because of that, like I used to take a lot of pictures ever since like बचपन से मतलब. And so it became a thing with me कि like I liked the whole process of taking a picture, like we used to have this chota camera back then. You know how digital cameras were like when they were just starting out, those chota rectangular blocks of silver का ऐसे like डब्बा लगता था. Yeah. So I used to take pictures with those cameras and they have very limited capacity, so you had to be creative with them ki like if you wanted either a close-up or if you wanted something from a different angle, you couldn't just like zoom in, zoom out, do this, do that. You had to like physically move everywhere and do all kinds of weird shit. So because of that, I generally always liked photography as an activity, and from there I think it just kind of grew ki like more trips I went on, the more different sites I saw. It was like obviously when you see something that you find extraordinary or that you haven't seen generally, you want to take a picture of it. Because of that, I just became very interested in photography. I started learning, and I had a couple of friends in school and tuition who were also like photographers. So we used to hang out, and the more we hung out, the more we learned about photography together. And because of this whole photography nonsense, I used to like hound my parents to get me a good camera. And after that happened, I slowly, got into birding, because one of the main reasons was also when I was in 9th and 10th, I had this tuition teacher who was a bird watcher. Like I had two tuition teachers, they were both bird watchers, and they used to talk about it whenever they weren't teaching us. Ki like, agar, free time hoga and all that. So they used to like talk about birds and different kinds of birds. They used to show us pictures and, different aspects of what a bird is, like what a bird does, how can you tell the male apart from female, and what are the different sounds each bird makes and why they do it, and these evolutionary changes that have led them to look this certain way. I always found this interesting. They also like took us out because we like photography, so they used to, whenever like chutti वगैरह ho, they used to take us out somewhere. And where I live, it's basically like jungle आसपास, so we could just go anywhere, and वहाँ पे जाके we would see all different kinds of birds, and it became like a very nice hobby to cultivate for me. You go into the bushes, you try to like find different birds, and you start documenting them. I actually had a blog with my friend from school about the birds that we used to find around my house, near my area, and all that. And because of that, we just became big bird watchers. after that it just became like a general normal part of my life. What happens is, if you see enough birds and if you identify enough birds, it becomes like a normal thing. Like how you would see a person and you immediately recognize that person, it becomes kind of that thing. I would just walk around and I would see a bird that is out of the ordinary. I would always like point to it and I was like, this is this bird. So it became a very normal part of my life, which it still is now. So
I didn't know that you had a blog before.
I did. It was like we had like 3-4 posts about birds that we used to find in our area. And as happens with every teenage blog, it kind of just died out.
I think all of us have that sad blog story. We'll get
Yeah.
into that later. But Vivek, why don't you take this ahead? And how did you jump into photography and birds? Tell us about that.
I wouldn't call myself a photographer yet because I'm only as good as my camera. The case was the opposite with me. I got a bit into photography because of bird watching. We had moved to a new house and there was a lake in front of our house. A lot of different kinds of birds used to frequent this particular neighborhood. And like I said, I didn't know that you could see so many birds in the city itself. The common birds which I used to observe was sparrows and pigeons or crows. That was the limited birds which I knew inhabited the city. But after coming here, I realized that there are different, diversified kind of birds which actually are there in the city. We humans haven't driven them out of the city yet. So like I started seeing woodpeckers, which I only read about in books. From my vantage point, they were very far away. To get a good view of them, I started using my camera and I started capturing them and then posting it on social media. I used to observe like how they are, foraging for food or building their nest or even courting their partner. Like most of the birds, when they court their partner, like they dance around them. I never consciously realized that I'm becoming a bird watcher. It was only after someone pointed out to me. And at the same time, I started using the same camera for, capturing night sky objects. So like these two hobbies grew at the same time. And I'm glad that it happened. When you start doing it on a regular basis, you develop an eye for it. I even started observing those same birds from my office windows. I could see kingfisher and woodpecker sometimes, or a cormorant is there. So those birds were there, but like they were limited in those areas, so it is hard to spot them. But like once you develop an eye for it, it becomes easier for you to spot those birds.
Yeah, I think it's something about movement. You start to notice movement in the corner of your eye, because what happens is usually birds are on like a certain eye level. Either they're completely on the ground, which is very hard to spot, or they're in the bushes, which is like almost eye level, or they're on the wires or something, which is the easiest probably to spot. And the way they move, because of the movements, you sort of become attuned to the thing. Like there's something moving in the corner of my eye. I might not know what exactly it is, but it is a bird. You might not know which bird it is, but it is some kind of a bird. And so you just instinctually, start noticing these things the more you practice bird watching.
This is what happens. And like when you start watching the birds, now you realize they have different characteristics to themselves. Like there's a bird called black cormorant, it is an abundance in the city, I would say, compared to other birds. And from what I have observed, I think they can fly as high as a kite or an eagle. And at the same time, they can dive deep into the water to capture their prey. I never knew those things from books or by interacting with people. Then there are green bee eaters, which are very agile, and when you watch them glide through the air when they dive and they take up the flight, so those are amazing things to watch. Like it's like watching an airplane or taking a dive.
No, I was just saying about green bee eaters. Like every bird kind of has its own. I don't know what it is, but it's like an evolutionary thing. Because if you come across any green bee eater, what it has a certain MO, which is like when it lands on a branch, so it stays on a branch looking for its bees basically to eat. And whenever it finds a bee, it kind of takes a round in the air and comes back to the exact same spot to sit. It does that like every 10-15 times before it changes a spot, which is like its signature move. Other birds, it's different with them, because some birds, they'll constantly keep changing branches. Some birds won't change at all. Owls and owlets, they have this thing where they properly find that V-shaped crevice होता है ना tree में. They always find a crevice for them and they stay incredibly still there. So because of these things, you can kind of distinguish between even similar looking birds sometimes. Like how do you distinguish between say a baya weaver, a munia, a robin, and say an ashiperinia? So because they all almost the same size and almost same colorish, so you have to distinguish them based on their movement, that kind of stuff.
Damn, that's fascinating. I didn't know that there were so many variations or intricacies when spotting a bird. I thought you just spot it, you just search on Google and that's it. Well, apparently they have their MOs. So you're basically detectives for birds. So let me ask you this question to both of you. What was the craziest thing that you did to capture a bird photo? Let's start with Vivek this time.
So there's a tree which I can spot from my room window, and where every evening a flock of cattle egrets they come and they rest over there. So one evening I held a camera for about 30 minutes in the same position. My hands started aching, but I wanted to capture that cattle egret flapping its wings to take off from that tree. So I think that is the craziest thing I have done, maybe. Or maybe I also once encountered a snake. Like there's a small nursery like in front of my house. It's a government nursery where the plants and trees are grown for different government buildings. So I went there one afternoon and couple of snakes, were gliding past me, like going back to the lake because they were agitated when I entered there. Kind of, I was startled for a moment, and I was not sure whether I should continue like spotting the birds and capturing it, or whether I should go back. But fortunately, I did continue, and I spotted a very big kingfisher. Unfortunately, I was not able to capture it, but I spotted like the largest kingfisher I have till date. Those two were quite crazy moments for me.
I should have asked you more extreme things, what you did for space photography.
Like I have spent maybe more than 1 and 2 hours together perfect photos of Jupiter and Saturn. I even got up one night at 4 a.m. in the morning because like Saturn, Jupiter and Mars were visible on the same day. There were literally bats flying past me, so I could hear the bats noises, and that was quite an airy environment for me. But I'm not sure whether that qualifies for an extreme moment or not, but yeah.
No, but yeah, like your dedication to photography both with birds and space is astounding. Now, Pushkar, you live in a very junglous area. Tell us one of your craziest stories.
Okay, so this tuition sir I told you about, with whom I used to go bird watching. Like we used to go bird watching. So once, I say it was a Sunday, and they took like the three of us, like me and my friends, to this. There's a fort near my city. On that cliff, because there are trees growing out of the cliff, right? And one of those trees has an eagle's nest, and eagles are pretty rare to find just anywhere generally. So we were like, we want to like take pictures of the eagles and observe the nest. So we were like, let's go there. We went all the way up to the fort. We went to the cliff, and the nest was there. The eagle wasn't there, and basically the juvenile small baby eagle, so that was there in the nest, and we were like, we couldn't get a picture. And so what happened was, like, three of the people, like one of the sirs and two of my friends, they decided to stay wahi pe to observe the nest, and the other sir of mine and me, we were like, we'll go check it out niche se. Like it was his idea. He was like, we'll go down the cliff from a different route and we'll go check out the tree closer, and we'll see if we can spot anything. So we went down the cliff, we go climb back up from the other side. So I have my camera in my hand and he has his camera, and then we reach the tree, and so he gives me his camera. So I'm holding two cameras in my hands and I can't do anything, so I'm just staying there, like standing there quietly, and he's trying to climb the tree. Okay, so he's trying to climb. Suddenly from the nest, the baby eagle jumps out, and even like a baby eagle is as big enough, it's as big as a normal owl or something. That thing jumps out of the nest, and it hadn't completely learned to fly yet, so it just jumps and kind of dashes towards me. Now I have two cameras in my hands which I cannot drop because that is like 2 lakhs ka equipment. So now I'm like, my hands are frozen, my legs are frozen, the eagle is coming right toward me, and it just kind of glided and it hit my head and it just went past me. And in that moment, like, I was legitimately like, it was one of the scariest moments of my life, because if an eagle attacks you, it's gonna scratch the flesh off your back. And like our sirs had like told us about like owl attacks and eagle attacks, so
I was fearing for my life. That is probably, I think, the craziest thing that's happened to me during bird watching.
Apparently both of you are like really daredevils, fighting with snakes and eagles to capture photographs.
Before we move on, like, I'd just like to know, like, what is Vivek, what is your favorite bird?
It's hard to pick a favorite bird, but I think I like cattle egrets a lot, even though they can be scary. But I like them because when they move in the flock, that's a beautiful sight. I'll ask the same question to you. Which is the bird you like the most?
Yeah, for me, it's definitely there's this bird called the paradise flycatcher. Right? So the paradise flycatcher, it's a very shy bird. We always try hard to get pictures of it. If you can get a picture of a paradise flycatcher, it's considered a good day amongst bird watchers, at least. Yeah, it's like a small, tiny bird, white in color. Its body is completely white. Its head is black. It has a nice crest, and the distinguishing thing is it has a really long tail, about like 3 or 4 times the size of its body, and it's just like 1 or 2 long feathers just like going down, and whenever it flies the feather kind of does this zigzag motion, which it looks completely heavenly, dude. I've seen paradise flycatchers a few times in my life, and honestly, like after a while you just become mesmerized by its beauty, just like looking at it dancing around the landscape.
Okay, like is that bird native to India or is it from Papua Guinea? Because I know like there are a lot of exotic birds which are found in Papua New Guinea.
No, the paradise flycatchers are pretty common in India. You just have to go into like a pretty, wooded area to find them, because they don't generally come out into the open. But yeah, they're common enough if you go looking for them.
I guess now that we have removed the nature of anonymity in this episode, I'll put both of your Instagram handles in the description so that they can just reach out to your pages and see the amazing bird photographs that you take regularly. Apparently, Pushkar has rekindled that interest and has been posting numerous photos daily. Same with Vivek and Pushkar. Like, I've seen certain photographs that are absolutely amazing, and Vivek has this amazing thing that he posts a poem with the photograph, which is equally mesmerizing for me because I have never pegged him as a writer.
Oh, he writes his own poems. Nice. So I'm gonna have to follow him now.
So Vivek, why don't we just jump into that? Like, how did you start poem writing? Like, why is that something that you're inclined to?
I wrote my first poem back in class 5, I think. That was a 4 or 6 line Hindi poem. So like it started from there, but I never pursued that relentlessly. But lately, like sometimes when I'm free, if something fascinates me, I write some lines about that. Sometimes that turns into a poem, and if I like it, I post it along with some photos on Instagram. Like I try to put some witty captions with the photographs. It's just my attempt to, get my hands at writing.
It's actually interesting like how we diverted into books and writing and all of that, because that is one of the more common interests that you share as well. I know we have done a few episodes, we have talked here and there about books, but just as a tradition, probably whenever you guys are here, we usually do a few book recommendations and things that you're currently reading. So Pushkar, why did you go this time and tell us some new recommendations or something which you're reading right now, or your attempts at writing?
My attempts at writing, let's just not talk about that, because that's been on kind of a slow pedal right now. I haven't really been writing as much as I should. Anshul knows this.
But congratulations for finally finishing first draft of your book.
Yeah, I finished the first draft. Now I have to read my own crap, which is I think the worst part of writing a book. Yeah, other than that, I think I haven't been reading a lot of new books lately. The last one that I finished is obviously Hitchhiker's Guide, which you guys know already. You guys have read it.
Other than that, off the top of my head, did I recommend Kurt Vonnegut last time?
Well, why don't you recommend it again?
Fine, sure, why not? Like, any excuse to talk about him. Okay, so if you guys don't know who Kurt Vonnegut is basically, he was an American writer from the 60s. First of all, his life is very interesting. He fought in World War II. First of all, he's of German descent, and then he went to fight in World War II,
where he was a prisoner of war in Germany, in the city of Dresden. And
the Americans actually bombed Dresden during World War II, and it was one of the biggest, bombing campaigns that ever happened in the world. He saw the destruction of that city firsthand. He wrote about it in his letters that he sent back home. How the morning after the bombing, he woke up, they were hiding underground, and when they came to the surface, they just saw streets lined with bodies, and because they were prisoners of war, they were the ones who had to like clean up the bodies and everything. And that experience, I think, really shaped him as a person. And after that, when he generally like got into writing, his view has always been of complete empathy. Like Kurt Vonnegut, I think, is one of the most empathetic writers that you'll find. Whenever you read his writing, any of his writing, you'll feel just like immense compassion and empathy and love towards just generally like everything. The way he writes, the way he talks about people, the way he talks about war, how horrible it is, and the bluntness of his words. Like one of his most famous works is Slaughterhouse-Five, which is based on his experiences in Dresden, and also it's a sci-fi novel because of course sci-fi. Yeah, so in that he talks about war in the first thing, like how World War II, they were basically sending children to fight a war. Not even fight a war, they were sending children to die in a war. And the way he writes, it makes you feel so horrible about everything that's happened and it makes you, feel that something like this should never happen again. Also, Kurt Vonnegut, he wrote about very absurd things, in service of making a larger point. So Slaughterhouse-Five is like half of a sci-fi novel and half of a war novel. It's very interesting. And some of his other novels like Breakfast of Champions and Mother Night and Galapagos are all novels where he talks about general issues of humanity that consume humanity as whole. Go read Kurt Vonnegut. He's one of the greatest writers ever for a reason, and any book you pick up of his, even his worst books, are like some of the greatest things ever written.
That's a nice recommendation. Probably I'll pick up one of his books after I finish reading Hitchhikers. Then why don't we jump into Vivek now? Why don't you tell us your current journey with writing, reading, and some book recommendations?
For a moment I forgot that I was actually recording this podcast. I was thinking that maybe I'm listening to both of you conversing, and the passion with which Pushkaraj described that book, it got me intrigued. So I'm definitely going to read the book he has recommended. And I also wanted to congratulate him on completing a book, because that is a huge task. I have a few failed attempts at starting a book, so I know how difficult a task writing a book is.
Thank you. Because even I have had a few failed attempts at writing a book, and this is like, I think, the first proper successful one. So let's hope it pays off. Let's see.
Yeah, so like I completed Hitchhikers, 3 parts of Hitchhikers recently. Apart from reading about Homo Deus and Elon Musk, I think I've actually talked about all the books I've read lately on your podcast, Anshul. But I can talk about the change of taste I've had in books lately. Earlier, I was more of a fiction reader, but I have migrated towards reading non-fiction lately. Like I can name at least 6 personalities about whom I've read in the past 2 years, maybe. Starting from Elon Musk to APJ Abdul Kalam, Sudha Murthy, and then the founder of PayPal. And currently I'm reading a book by Edward Snowden where he talks about his own life. So that is a very change, because I find it fascinating that some of the people have accomplished so much more than what I have done so far. And that gives you a sense of inspiration and, maybe a drive to push yourself to achieve what you believe in. Reading these books gave me inspiration to, check out rocket science and more of physics stuff. So I've been watching a lot of videos on rocket science and physics because I have no educational knowledge about those things.
And are you still writing some poems, or is that on a pause for now?
That has been on a halt for, I think, maybe 6 months. There has been some lack of inspiration lately. But it comes naturally. When I push myself to write those poems now, it doesn't come out that good. But when it comes naturally, and I don't know how, but the flow which the words are going, it's much better than when I start, pushing and or start rhyming my words. I think I spoil the meaning of the poem and it comes out something very stupid. Because the ones you see on Instagram are the ones which are actually good. I filter out all the bad ones and they are stored and locked in my phone. If you read those poems, you'll realize that I'm not much of a writer. But sometimes, by luck, some things comes out good.
Well, we'll look forward to your writing more. But are you planning on, we heard about your failed attempts for writing a book, so are you planning on starting something soon?
I think I'll give a try at writing a book again.
Yeah, no, because it's quite interesting. Even if you fail, the ideation and the discussion thing is itself beautiful, and you never know, it might just become a successful.
I'm actually planning on starting with short stories, because I think I won't be able to write a long book now. So maybe I'll give a try to write a short, witty 60-page or 70-page story. For that, I need to, come up with an idea or a story which is actually inspiring or something different from the books which are there, which might actually appeal to people and something they might be able to relate to. Because there are very popular books like by Khalid Hosseini, which has been inspiring to a lot of people. Then Tuesdays with Maury, which inspires people. Then there are a lot of Indian figures which we are not aware of. So if I come up with an idea which I believe might help people in general and in a very remote way humanity as well, I might actually pursue the difficult task of writing a book.
You're right. You should definitely try short stories, because even I wrote a couple of short stories which kind of gave me the confidence to write this thing that I'm writing right now. And what I found is the more personal your writing is, I think the more universal it becomes. Some of the smallest things that you feel or that you experience that might seem completely personal to you and unique to you because of your circumstances or because of your cultural differences or something. Sometimes those things are the things that become the most universal. I watch a lot of foreign cinema, right? I watch a lot of French movies and Japanese movies and this and that. But even in that, I found that some of the best foreign movies, some of the best Japanese cinema is the cinema that is about just people being very personal with each other. Stories that are very personal to the creators, that are like either autobiographical or they feel strongly about. So maybe like think about that. And something that helps me inspire to write is, I guess, listening to music. Music plays a big part in the book that I'm writing right now. But even just generally, I think listening to music is a good enough inspiration to kind of motivate yourself to write. I don't know how much that helps, but yeah.
No, I was just saying that when you write a poem or you write a small book or you write a book, people might look at it differently because of our own innate perceptions and preconditioned notions with which we read a book. Different people read a book with different perspectives. The same is the case with music. So I've seen, like, when you are listening to your music, that same song can mean, I think, millions of things to millions of different people because they are able to relate it in a different way.
That's true, because right now I'm really like diving deep into 60s and 70s British rock bands, and one of my favorite bands actually is the Kinks. The weird thing about the Kinks is like they're not like the Beatles, or they're not like some of the other British bands like Queen or something that they sing about bigger like psychedelic things or like worldly things. The Kinks have a very niche area of subject where they have entire albums on just like daily life on the British countryside. They talk about school days, they talk about having a cat, stuff like that, just like normal stuff. They talk about strawberry jam and marmalade and going on picnics and stuff. And I don't know what it is, but something about them just talking about this everyday stuff in their songs kind of makes them so much more relatable to me. The way they sing about it, it's so personal to me, because it shouldn't be, right? It should be they're singing about something that's completely different, that probably hits the British people completely differently. But even as someone who is here in India, who is completely removed from the British population, can really relate with whatever it is they're singing about.
Okay, Vivek, why don't you tell us about what are the kind of music that you're listening to and what are the kind of music that inspires you?
Like, I don't have a particular taste in music, but I like music which are generally slow. If it's too loud, I can't enjoy the music. I want the rhythm or the melody to be slow paced at a continuous pace so that my synapses in my brain can actually, grasp it. Because if the music is too loud, everything in my brain goes haywire and I can't focus on anything. Like, I listen to all kinds of music. I even listen to retro Indian music by Lata Mangeshkar, or I even try to listen to English songs. Some of my favorite songs are from 1960s only, or like by Simon and Garfunkel or Beatles, Queen. They have created some, the best pieces of music for me. Some of the songs like The Sound of Silence, Homeward Bound. There's one song by Simon and Garfunkel, The Dangling Conversation. It is more of a poem than a song, I would say. I can listen to that song on a loop for such a long time. It's a very small song, but in that particular small, they capture so many emotions of humankind or human mind, And if an old couple listen to that song, they would be able to relate it. Even a young couple would be able to relate it. Or even two friends which are sitting and having a conversation, or they just by themselves, they can relate to it. Like, if we don't talk about A.R. Rahman when you're talking about music, I think that will be a bit of injustice, because I've been listening to some of his songs lately, and I would say that he's truly a master of music. The symphonies and the melodies which he creates are quite distinct, and that is very soothing to your ears.
Yeah, okay. So since we're talking about writing and music, I think like I cannot help but mention one of the greatest, Satyajit Ray. Satyajit Ray, like he's one of the, I think, greatest people who ever lived. And his music, if you can find it, I think Spotify has a lot of his music. He scored some of his own films. So some of the music that he's composed for like Charulata and Jalsagar and Teen Kanya, if you're in that mood, then you'll absolutely love that music, because it just puts you in that kind of nostalgic, old school Indian lifestyle vibe that you just feel like you're living that era. Of course, like when it comes to writing as well, Satyajit Ray has wrote some of the most amazing and interesting Indian literature. Everything from like the Feluda stories to YouTube short film. It was an adaptation of a sci-fi story that Satyajit Ray wrote. I forgot what it's called. Anukul or something like that. Another like connection between the Kinks and Satyajit Ray. If you haven't seen the Darjeeling Limited by Wes Anderson, which is a great movie, but the soundtrack for Darjeeling Limited is composed entirely of songs by the Kinks and Satyajit Ray's compositions. I read, I think, biography about him in my first year of college, and I've been obsessed with him ever since, because he was a writer, he was a filmmaker, one of the greatest filmmakers, he was a composer.
He did so many amazing things. His impact was so worldwide, and it absolutely frustrates me that movies in India today have kind of just completely forgot that Satyajit Ray was a thing. You cannot see his influence anywhere. Maybe a couple of like movies by some Bengali filmmakers, but other than that, it's just kind of non-existent.
Who was the director of 2001: A Space Odyssey? I can't recall his name.
Kubrick.
Yeah. People used to compare Satyajit Ray to Kubrick because people say that the things he could do with the camera, no one else could. Like he could guide cameraman to capture images or videos which no one else could do it.
Satyajit Ray's filmmaking style was absolutely revolutionary. Like the way he moved his camera, the way he composed his shots.
Like just in Charulata, I was just watching it the other day, and Charulata, the first movie, have no dialogue at all. You're just following one person, that's like Charu. You're just following her throughout the interior of this house, and you just see whatever she's doing to pass the time. Satyajit Ray, the way he films it, he keeps it so engaging. It's absolutely like a masterclass in film. Okay, another he's a Bengali, R.D. Burman. I don't think there is a composer, like, there is nobody in the history of Indian music who can arrange songs as well as R.D. Burman could. Just the use of different instruments, everything from like a barrel drum to a santoor to a reso, stuff like that he used in his songs. Like he revolutionized Indian music in a way that hasn't been replicated since. And another sci-fi connection I can make, which is, that song Aadhe Ke Zara from Rocky. So that song is the entire music of that song. It's actually a ripoff of this song called The Eve of the War, which is on an album called The War of the Worlds, which is a musical rendition of H.G. Wells' book The War of the Worlds.
Oh damn.
Yeah.
I think when we're on the topic of like people of Bengali origin who revolutionized music industry in a way, I think we cannot leave out Rabindranath Tagore. Even though he lived a century ago, what he did was completely revolutionary for that particular time. He even went on to win Nobel Prize in Literature.
No, we also can't forget, because he is the one who actually wrote Nastaner, which became Charulata. And it's based on his life. And I actually used Nastaner in my book. There's a reference to that particular work.
At some point we have to end this podcast. It is one legendary after another legendary. I understand you guys are both excited. We shall continue this on a later date. But yeah, it's actually amazing, knowing these part about your lives, your stories about bird watching, photography, and music. 3 things which I am not at all attuned with, but something which I am gonna follow more passionately, given that some of my close people in my life are really into it, and it's actually quite fascinating more than that. So a good recommendation overall for me and for all the listeners. But thank you so much for being guests as always. Chalo, we'll then wrap up. Bye bye.
Thank you, Anshul, for having us. Bye bye. Take care.
And everybody stay safe, wash your hands.
Yes. Thank you to all the listeners. I'll catch up with you again soon with someone new and lots of interesting discussions. So, bye.